Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 58th Annual ICSC Conference and the first virtual conference. Today's session, Meeting at the Crossroads, where Stewardship, Engagement, Evangelization, and Discipleship intersect, will be presented today. My name is Renita Lloyd-Smith, and I am the Stewardship Communication Consultant at LPI. Join me now in our conference prayer. Gracious and loving God, we gather in your name to draw from a wellspring of wisdom that will enrich our lives and the lives of those we love and serve. Through this networking, sharing of ideas and discernment, though, lift us up, open our eyes, lead us into an encounter with your Son on higher ground, where we will be drawn to moments of epiphany, deeper self-awareness, and profound grace. In these times of uncertainty and stress, do not abandon us, but pour out your Spirit upon us so that its power becomes our power. Make us good stewards of what we take away from here and inspire us to proclaim the gospel without shame, offer hope to others, and give glory to you in every word we speak and action we take. We pray this through your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Tracy Earl Welliver. He is the Senior Director of Church Engagement at LPI. An author, speaker, coach, husband, and father, he's the guru of all things stewardship. I now turn the virtual podium over to my friend, Tracy Earl Welliver. Welcome.
Well, hello, everybody. I see we still have some people coming into the room. And let me just say to you that down below, you'll see the Q&A button. During the course of the workshop, if you want to ask any questions, we'll try to answer those at the end. So you just go ahead and click that button. I don't know, are we full screen now? Okay, so I wouldn't know. All right, so welcome. You know, I am very excited about this topic. I mean, I'm always excited about most topics that I present. I mean, not all, every once in a while, right? But this topic has really come out of a lot of thinking, reflecting, studying, having conversations with people. And I think it's important for us to talk about the intersection of these things: stewardship, engagement, evangelization, and discipleship. And, you know, I've been at LPI now for a little over 6 years, 6.5. And I came to LPI in 2014, and I want to begin today with just an acknowledgement. Paul Knappin, who is the former CFO, CEO, and chair of the board of directors for LPI, recently passed away. In fact, his funeral was just this past Friday. And, you know, he battled leukemia for a number of years and unfortunately lost that battle. And, you know, he is someone that not only I admire, but he is really the reason why I'm at LPI. It was in 2014 that he and Karin Winghart, the vice president of marketing, came down to Greensboro, North Carolina. And we sat in a cafe for about 4 hours just talking about the future. And it was really Paul's vision for moving churches forward that made me want to come to LPI. And, you know, I dedicate this to him, but I also, invoke him because of the spirit he had for the church. And that spirit, that desire to move parishes forward in terms of their vibrancy, to help them build themselves into something that is an instrument of peace and love, to communicate the good news to all of those around. And we do that through stewardship, engagement, evangelization, discipleship. You know, I started using the acronym SEED, and it's about planting seeds, isn't it? It's about planting seeds in the lives of people, in communities. And it doesn't necessarily represent the logical sequence for most people, right? So, you know, we had to arrange it so it makes sense. Seed, because if not, it's EADS, and that doesn't mean anything, right? So when I started thinking about this notion of how these things interact and intersect with one another, one of the things I decided to do was do a webinar series. And 2020 has been a difficult year, but it's also been a blessing in many ways for me, because I was able to do 2 webinar series. There's one on generosity that we just ended not too long ago, but this one on planting seeds. And I really reached out to get 5 top experts in these particular areas, right? And spend time with them and help inform me and help have that conversation. Because how do we figure things out? We figure things out by having a conversation. I mean, honestly, I love conferences, and you can come to conferences and hear people talk to you, but ultimately, once they talk, then you need to talk, and we need to converse, and we need to share with one another. So that's what I did with these individuals in this webinar series. And what I want to do right now is, and this is actually fun for me to kind of reflect on these, but let's go through each part of the seed and see what that part is about. And let's see if we can find common strains that run through all of them, that show how they are similar, but at the same time, then, can we differentiate? Because too often times in a parish, we are focused on one thing or the other. And I'm seeing this more and more in the church. I'm seeing more and more in the church, you know, hey, we're a stewardship parish. That sometimes means we're not focused on this. Or I've seen other parishes where, like, I don't have time for that stewardship thing. It's all evangelization all the time, right? Some parishes are just focused on engagement, getting people involved, getting people to do things. And, you know, they're not the same. They really aren't. And let's explore what we mean by that. So let's take engagement first. And my first guest was Dr. Dan Ebner from Ambrose University. And, you know, he's written many books on pastoral planning and things like that. And he's really worked in a lot of communities, church communities and secular communities, to build engagement. And so I asked him, so what is your definition of engagement? So he said, when people are self-motivated. So let's think about that in a church context. When we're saying we're trying to engage people, we're trying to move them into a state of engagement. What does that look like? What that looks like is people participate of their own accord. So oftentimes, when I'm talking about communications, we're talking about the need to communicate constantly and consistently, but to realize that communication alone is not the ticket, right? I mean, we're not shooting for more and more and more and more communication alone. Because, for instance, you know, as I know, if you're working in a parish, just because you put something in the bulletin 10 times in a row, 10 weeks in a row, doesn't mean, but it comes, right? I mean, if I worked in a parish for 22 years, and I'm well aware that there are plenty of times where we pitched, and boom, that didn't happen. The crowd did not come out. Engagement is when you have to tell someone one time, and they come one time. So oftentimes when I'm talking to a group, I say, so let's imagine that I said today, tomorrow, there's going to be a special mass that the pastor's going to say, we're going to have a big meal together, and everyone's invited. Usually I'm speaking to parish leaders and those who are engaged. And I ask them, so if I told you that, do I have to tell you that again? The answer almost always, I got it. But if you're disengaged, I told you that, and I tell you that again, and what happens the day after you say, hey, I was going to go to that thing. When was that anyway? Look it up in a bulletin. Check the website. It just doesn't sink in. So what we're shooting for in terms of engagement is to create self-motivators, those that want to do things of their own accord. And there are many ways to do that. What he shared with us, Dr. Dan, were 4 keys from this writer, Kenneth Thomas, right? Who works normally in the business world, but these keys still apply here. So what you have to ask of people, there has to be meaningfulness. Okay, so it has to be meaningful. There has to be a reason, there has to be a why. We can't just ask people to be involved for involvement's sake. It has to be because of some reason, or we're moving towards something. The second key is choice. You know, we can tell in parishes when you have tremendous engagement, say with teenagers. If you're lucky enough to have a parish that has a large youth ministry, I'll bet there's a fundamental aspect there of choice, meaning I'm not forced, right? And you say, well, sometimes you have to force them. I get it. I get that, okay? Don't get me wrong. But choice, to be able to choose my path, to choose how I'm going to respond. And at this point, since we're talking about engagement, we're not even talking about respond to Christ yet. We're talking about just respond to the community, respond to the call to do something, right? And I shared with Dr. Dan that in my experience, this was key in our parish, because for years we had tried to get more and more people in Bible studies, brought in experts, did all these things. So it pulled out all the tricks, and we still had about the same number. When Bible study exploded in our community, it was when we offered choice. But it's counterintuitive. You want people to come to something and hardly anyone's coming. You offer it more often with choices. So we moved from like 30 people to literally like 160 people involved in Bible study. It's just they're involved in many different Bible studies, and they had a choice. I mean, that's an amazing development. The third key is using talents and gifts. Now, I've been a certified Gallup Strengths coach for 10 years, and I work in churches, coaching individuals, groups, and such. And there's something fundamental there that I certainly know, and the research shows us that when we're using our gifts and talents, we are happiest. And in this context, if we can use our gifts and talents in our engagement, doing something in the community, that's when we're going to stick with it. If you're going to ask people to do something that they don't have a talent for, either they're going to stick with it totally out of obligation and it's going to be unfulfilling, and we're not going to be able to move them from engagement to evangelization or discipleship or stewardship. They're just going to be stuck there. Or they're just going to drift away. Okay? The fourth key is progress. And I thought this was really interesting, and thinking about this in my experience in church. people want to be involved in something that's moving us forward. So when we talk about like moving from maintenance to mission, that mission has to be about going somewhere or moving the needle, improving the overall community, not just in our parish, but our surrounding community, making a difference. We're actually doing something and we can see a change in us and the individual in our community as it happens. That's so very important. And you think to yourself right now, the things you do in the parish community, oftentimes that you ask people to do, and you do the same thing year after year after year. And the question is, have you moved down the road at all? Are you still in the same place? And if you're still in the same place, that's not going to engage people as much. So the value of engagement is it gets people to a place where they are connected, right? And so Archbishop Thomas Murphy, one of the giants in stewardship tradition, as it were, in our modern church, said belonging leads to belief. So this is key. This is key because engagement is about belonging, and ultimately we try so often to catechize, to push belief onto people that do not yet feel like they belong, and they don't get it, and so they drift away. Even people who've been there for decades, they start to drift away because they weren't really engaged yet. Time doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, we live in a church now, and you, like I, probably have seen many people who've been in church for decades, and now they're gone. What happened? Right? So the first part of the seed, engagement. Then in a traditional model, the way most people, right? Once I'm engaged, once I have a sense of belonging, will lead to belief, evangelization, right? So we had Tim Glemkowski, who now just recently took a job at the Archdiocese of Denver. So congratulations, Denver. You got a good guy there. And, we were talking about evangelization, and he said, evangelization is the process of conversion when someone hears the gospel message and entrusts their life to Christ. So in many ways, right, engagement is getting the person to a point where evangelization, where they can hear that gospel message, right? I mean, imagine, so like the Super Bowl, next year, maybe we have a Super Bowl party. I mean, the Super Bowl is the engagement. Everyone comes together, right? All those advertisements, boom, they're trying to give you a message. Now they're trying to advertise to you Doritos and Mountain Dew, which is not really important at all. It's really horrible for you. But in the church, how do we get someone engaged, give them the gospel message? On the USCCB website, there was a great paraphrase of Pope Paul VI on evangelization in the modern world. Evangelizing means bringing the good news of Jesus into every human situation and seeking to convert individuals and society by the divine power of the gospel itself. So what is the key words? I mean, for me, is the good news of Jesus into every human situation. Engagement is not about every human situation. Engagement is about a time and a place, an activity, a specific connection. Evangelization is about covering all of our human experience. And that's where evangelization becomes, so monumental to focus on, because it's not about getting people to do things in the parish. It is about bringing Jesus into every aspect of their life. It is about Jesus in their homes and Jesus in their workplaces and Jesus in their families. And for many an individual, right, the process of conversion, that spiritual journey, begins with an engagement and then the evangelization, the sharing of the message. I mean, if you think about this, even just in simple human relationships, you know, I befriend someone, they, you know, they start to trust me. And we know from our work now in evangelization and the work of Sherry Waddell, right? Trust, the first threshold in moving someone to intentional discipleship. So that first threshold in evangelization, we have that trust. You usually can't get to that trust without some engagement, right? So we have that, and we start to influence every aspect of their life. Then the next part of the seed is discipleship. And I was very privileged to have Julianne Stans as my guest from the Diocese of Green Bay. You know, great game last night. Aaron Rodgers is on fire. You know, Julianne didn't have anything to do with that, but, you know, maybe she prays for the Packers. I don't know. But she was fabulous. And, you know, and she's one of our plenary speakers this year. And I asked her, so what is discipleship in your words? She simply said, being a friend and follower of Jesus. So friend and follower. You know, let's break that down a little bit. So a friend, you can't be a friend of someone that you don't know. And so we are friends with those that we have engaged. And then once we have engaged and once we've heard what they have to say, we have some buy-in. To be a follower then means we're going to go on a journey with them and we're going to let them lead us. To be a friend and a follower of Jesus does take some time. It doesn't happen like that. And so evangelization leads to this state of discipleship. And Julianne talked about 3 marks of a disciple. The first one is that we are missionary. So this is good to understand, like when you're looking in your parish community and you're looking at individuals. So is this person yet moved from simple engagement to discipleship? Well, the first thing you're looking for is, do they have a desire to share their faith? Because a disciple who's that friend and follower has to tell somebody else. You know, I mean, there are things that I absolutely love. I mean, I love Jesus and I tell people about Jesus, but I think about other things in my life, right? I mean, I'm a record collector. I love vinyl. I love my turntable. I love to talk to people about that. I love it. I love to talk about it. I love to share about it because it is that meaningful to me. It means something to me. The first mark of a disciple is they are missionary and they want to share that. The next mark is mature. Immediately when she said that, I mean, what I thought of was the bishop's pastoral letter on stewardship of disciples' response, right? Because what the U.S. bishops in that letter say is we are called to be mature disciples. They answer the call of Jesus Christ regardless of the cost. Mature disciples. So there's a maturity, a movement from basic faith. It's not just the fundamentals, right? In evangelization, oftentimes we talk about that word kerygma, great big word, which basically means the foundation of faith, right? The kernel of truth. Who is Jesus? Why did he come? What does his death and resurrection mean for you and me? So that's very basic, that's standard. We got to move past that. Unfortunately, in the church, one of the reasons we are having difficulties is because we have to go backwards. Because we've tried to move people into maturity when they haven't had basic faith, right? Because they know tenets of the church, they know sacraments or anything like that, but they can't answer the question, so who is Jesus? And they give a textbook answer, but that's not the right answer. The answer is, if you have a relationship, if you're a friend and follower of anyone, and I ask you about them, you're going to tell me all about them. You're not going to give a textbook answer. You're going to tell me from your perspective. So a movement from basic faith. And then the last mark is intentional, right? That there's made a conscious decision. So disciples are those that are no longer coming to church simply because that's what they do, or simply because their mother and father are Catholic. Here's an interesting thought, that as we are slowly coming back to our churches after COVID-19, we are concerned about who will come back. Will there be those who have lost the attachment to ritual and habit, as it were, and don't return? Perhaps most of those who return have these 3 marks of a disciple. Perhaps those who do not return did not make a decision. And what does that mean for us as church? What that means for us is we enter into a period of time where evangelization becomes more key than ever, because we have to reach out to those that did not come back. And in essence, we plant those seeds again and say, hey, it wasn't what you wanted it to be beforehand, and that's why you walked away. Now is the time. Let's begin again. Let's reintroduce you to Jesus. It's a thought. The 4th part of the seed then is stewardship. And I had the privilege of talking with Father John Jirak from the Diocese of Wichita, and asking him what stewardship was. He was like, okay, this is extremely important. I'm going to give you the Wichita definition. And he said it's important. He says it doesn't have to be everyone's definition, but it's the Wichita definition, and it's important because we all have the same language, because language is key. How we talk about things is key. He said the grateful response of a Christian disciple who recognizes and receives God's gifts and shares these gifts in love of God and neighbor. And he says that's so important that we all have the same definition in this diocese, is because we have a common framework, we have a common language, we know what we're talking about. And if we talk about, some of you may have been on the fireside chat last night, we talked about the 4 C's of stewardship communication, and 2 of them are constant and consistent. And so Father John was talking about the importance of that in the Diocese of Wichita. Constant and consistent. That this definition is everywhere, but it remains the same, so that we have a common ground from which to have our conversation. He talked about, in our church, he sees a fundamental change in stewardship as moving from duty-driven to discernment-driven. He said there was a time where stewardship was easier. It was easier to talk about because you're talking to a group of people who had this sense of duty. This is my duty. This is what I do because I am Christian. And he said the new generations coming up, they don't think that way. They're not wired that way. And so it's about, I need to discern my calling. I need to discern my path in life. And we talked about, this is not a one way is better than the other. It's simply the way that it is. And in some respects, discernment-driven stewardship does connect with those other parts of the seed, doesn't it? Choice and engagement, making a decision to be a disciple, to discern how I will live out the stewardship way of life. That seems to be pretty key in all of those. He said, we are led by the Spirit. And he said engagement can also be seen as accompaniment. And isn't that interesting that the idea that when we engage someone, we journey with them, that's what it's about. Sometimes we want to turn engagement into doing stuff. You know, how many people are doing stuff in your parish? I got a great stewardship parish. I got so many people doing stuff. I got, just stuff going on all the time. But if you look at it in terms of accompaniment, I got so many people journeying with us at the same time. We are walking hand in hand. We are walking with each other. That's key. So we had the 4 parts of the seed there, right? 4 parts of the seed. And then I had a conversation where we try to pull everything together. My guest was Father James Mallon from Divine Renovation up in Canada, Nova Scotia. And, I got to know him over the course of several ICSE conferences years ago. And, he really is about stewardship, but he talks about it a little bit differently. I mean, one of the things that he pointed out was that we as church oftentimes cling to model over mission. We cling to, this is the way we're going to do things. This is the framework in which we have to do all of this. We have to plant these seeds, right? This is the framework in which we are going to engage, in which we're going to evangelize, in which we're going to lead people to discipleship and on to stewardship. And he's like, sometimes we become slaves to that, as opposed to the mission. Where are we going? What are we about? And so in many ways, the how, the what, the when become totally secondary to the why. And it's the why that's the most important. Now let's think back to other parts of the seed. We're talking about engagement. Things have to be meaningful. When we're talking about evangelization, we're talking about moving the good news into every aspect, every situation of life. To do that, I mean, that means it has to be pertinent and meaningful in that person's life, right? So this is key, to not cling to a program or a process, but to be mission oriented. He said there are 3 keys that make all of the difference. And this was regardless of the seed, but he was talking about how they blend and such. 1, the primacy of evangelization. And I think in many ways, this was the most important thing that was talked about in the entire webinar series. He said, stewardship without evangelization can lay heavy burdens. And he talked about years ago when he was first coming to stewardship conferences and such, and he was going back to his parish, and he was all about just stewardship for a while there. And he says, I realized that I was trying to lead people to a stewardship way of life who had not yet encountered Jesus Christ. And what I was doing was laying heavy burdens upon them because they didn't get it. And in many ways, for them, it was just more stuff I have to do. And so he said evangelization has to be, I mean, you need all 4 parts of the seed, but evangelization has to be the key part, the first part. Now he said, right, engagement, you engage people to get them to evangelization. Sometimes you evangelize them to get them to engagement. So in that way, people have different paths, and the stages can, move around based upon a person's state in life and such, but it has to be about introducing them to Jesus. It has to be about the good news. The second one was excellent team-based leadership. So definitely how we lead in a parish community makes all of the difference, and team-based leadership. And it's one of the reasons why he was involved, and it's one of the reasons why we at LPI have been involved with Amazing Parish. Amazing Parish is not something that's, the same as an ICSE conference. It's totally geared towards leadership development. And how are we going to be leaders? The third thing was experiencing the power of the Holy Spirit. Immediately made me think back to Father John, talking about how we need to be Spirit-led. And Father James said, we have to be open in all that we do in our heart and in our minds to see where the Spirit is taking us. Do not fight the Spirit. And experience that power and realize that what we are involved in is a supernatural reality. Sometimes we boil this down and we think it's all about what we do and, the programs we put forth and so on and so forth. But make no mistake, you and I are involved in a supernatural reality every single day. It's one of the things I often say I love about being Catholic, and that we as Catholics make the extraordinary ordinary. Never be fooled into believing that it is only what you see or what you do at hand. When we talk about stewardship in this conference, we're talking about living a way of life and being generous and giving back to God and all of these things. And don't ever believe that it's about human action alone, because it is about divine participation in our daily lives. So those were the 5. And when I reflect on what are the main takeaways for me in terms of how pieces of the seed interact and how I am to look at this, because what I want parishes to take away is that we can't be on a journey where we're only on one part of the seed. I worked with a parish and they said, hey, this year we focused on stewardship. Would you recommend next year we focus on evangelization? And I said, I would recommend that you focus on all four parts of the seed at all times. However, at certain points in time, maybe you're going to have an added emphasis, right? But you can't leave one by the wayside, because if you do, it'll leave people on the side of the road. Meaning when we look at those 4 parts of the seed, when we look at a group of people, all of those people are going to be touched by a part of that seed, not the wholeness of the seed at any given point in time, perhaps. And so some people need to be engaged. Some people need to be evangelized. Some people need to really take seriously their discipleship, and some people need to move to that next level. The parts of the seed will meet people where they can be found. And I think that's so vitally important. I think about the words of Father James laying heavy burdens, and I think to myself, how many people in the church have felt that way and have walked away? I have a friend, my wife was her confirmation sponsor, and her parents were so heavily involved in a parish. They, both of them took turns being parish council chairs. They did so many different things. And for the last 20 years, they haven't even gone to church. And I think to myself, what happened there? Because were they so involved because of a sense of duty and what they were simply asked to do? Or were they involved because they had met the living, risen Christ? I don't want to be presumptuous. I don't know for sure, right? But something didn't keep them in community, didn't keep them part of the body of Christ, and they're not worshiping anywhere. There are times for certain crops, but we must plant all for a full harvest. There will be times where we need to focus on a portion, a part of the seed. But if we want our communities to have that fullness of the Christian community, to really experience what it is leading people to Christ, the multitudes, then we're going to have to be willing to plant all those parts of the seed. The third thing is stewardship is needed if the harvest is to make a difference. Stewardship is needed if the harvest is to make a difference. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is there are many people who find themselves in a relationship with Jesus Christ. They are the friend and they are the follower, but they don't know the what next. And when you don't know the what next, you can easily fall into the trap of believing that that's it. I mean, some of our evangelical brothers and sisters, that is kind of the framework for some of their communities, right? I've come to know him. I've decided. Done. Right? When are you born again? Done. And it's not done. Now, we're not saying that our works lead to our salvation, but what we are saying is, yeah, you now know Jesus. You're the friend and the follower, and there's work to be done. If we as church are going to make a difference, stewardship is absolutely essential, but it has to be a way of life preached to those who have experienced other parts of the seed. We cannot call an entire community to the exact same thing. It will never happen, and we will lose people. So we have to be willing to say, literally, where are you on your journey? Let's start there. Let's start there. I mean, literally, only an emphasis on stewardship is like me going to the gym and expecting to lose 100 pounds by the end of next week. If that is at all possible, please message me because I'm going to go for that. But not going to happen. And so I need to have a journey, a process. It's going to take a lot of different aspects. It's going to take diet. It's going to take getting to know how to use the machines of the gym. It's going to take leadership, helping to coach me. It's going to take so many different aspects to get me to the point where I'm going to be healthy and in shape. But if you're going to treat me like the guy who came in, who's, plays in an adult soccer league all the time and is super healthy and is real buff, I'm going to fail and I'm going to drift away. So we have to understand how these not only intersect, but how they people differently. To me, that's key, because at the end of the day, what is this all about? Some of you have seen a video and we produced a couple of years ago, and you can go to the LPI YouTube page, and it's right there, The Why of Stewardship. Stewardship is about the transformative power of Jesus Christ. And ultimately, our stewardship leads people to heaven. There's an end game to all of this. The end game is never to get more people into pews. The end game is never to get more money in the collection. The end game is never to just get more people to come to our events. The end game is leading people to heaven, plain and simple. There are many steps along that way, and we want to have all those other fruits. But if we don't have the true goal in mind and in our sights, where will we truly lead people to? At that, Renita, we have any questions?
We actually do have some questions. The first question is from Diana. She said, great session. We can talk about vinyl. Is it possible for you to do a Zoom session with a parish sometime soon?
Hello, Diana. It is absolutely possible. No problem at all. I mean, why don't you reach out to me on the Whova app, on the ICSC app? You can find me. You can click that little thing where it says we're going to exchange like digital cards or whatever the case may be. And you can click that and I will accept it. And then we'll have our information. We can get caught up sometime after the conference.
That's the only question that we have at this particular time.
They are speechless, Renita. They're speechless. Or it's so early in the morning. Those West Coasters, right? Those West Coasters, they probably watch this from their own beds, right? I mean, they just pulled up the covers and like, tuned in. Just to let everybody know, right? On the screen right now is the web address. So you can go and take in all 5 parts of that webinar series. It was an absolute blessing to do it. I just love the time with all the guests, and it really, I mean, I will say this, it really meant something to me in my own formation of understanding this. And to me, that's been a blessing of 2020 for me, time to reflect, time to think. And so take in those, that series. And, if you do, reach out to me and share your thoughts.
Renee Underwood wanted to let you know that she is here and watching. She doesn't have any questions, but as always, you are spot on.
Well, Renee, that's so good. I am glad that you are here and watching. Awesome. I think maybe another question just came in.
Yes, Michelle says, excellent presentation. And what is the best way to get administration on board and not just focus on fundraising?
Repeat that one more time for me.
Michelle wants to know, what is the best way to get administration on board and not just focus on fundraising?
All people are different, right? And so I can't say that there's an answer that's going to work for everyone. But the place that I would start is to provide them with some research, some articles maybe, even things that you can download from LPI's website or some other areas that help them to understand that if people buy into a mission, then they are more likely to give, right? Financially. So when we focus on giving financially, we miss the boat, because if that's the focus without the mission, then you're never going to be able to achieve the level of generosity which you seek. But if you focus on mission, people buy in. 2 things. One, so my parish community, some people were on the fireside chat last night. And incidentally, there's a fireside chat tonight if you want to be a part. And the topic is actually fueling generosity in the parish. So this might help that person. But, my own parish, we haven't been able to have everyone back at Mass. I think we're at like 30% or something like that. And the question was, when we were having a diocesan meeting, where are people in their offertory? Well, we've actually surpassed. We're actually ahead in our offertory this year. And that's not having, real offertory, passing a basket. And the question then was, what did you do during this period of time to have those numbers? The hard thing was there wasn't a good answer, because it wasn't about what we did during this time, which was nothing outlandish. I mean, we're barely streaming masses because our pastor says he has a face for radio. So we direct people to watch Father Mike Schmitz or something like that. but it is what we did before this, because we created the mission mentality. We led people there. So that's that. And then, the second thing was, again, the fireside chat tonight, if you're interested. I see a bunch of questions, so let me shut up. Go ahead, Renita.
Yes, it's okay. Anna wants to know, for a diocese, tips for us to accompany many parishes on these 4 pieces beyond. Another program, maybe?
So, another program, it's not that I'm against programs, but the way I always couch it is, I'm about conversations. So another program, how about something that brings about conversations? So maybe it is something like all taking part in watching the webinar series and then discussing it afterwards. Because it's totally free, everything's free. So, but I think the key is leading people to those conversations. We must get people to interact and talk with one another more. I mean, that's how catechesis works. Okay? So catechetical method, one of the first step after knowing what your goal is reaching out and touching their own experience, having them being able to share. So if you're going to lead anybody anywhere, the first thing you have to do is say, what are you thinking? How are you feeling? So conversation.
Okay. Nikki says, do you have any practical tips for how to integrate all 4 parts of the seed?
So, it's going to look different in every community. One of the things that I think the biggest tip that I shy away from is forming committees for each part of the seed. And I hate to have just made that face because I don't want to be sarcastic or anything like that. But, we as church, we do an awful lot of, hey, that sounds a great idea. Let's have a committee. That's just not the way that it works, because we're all about discipleship. We're all about engagement. We don't need committees to talk about those things specifically. What we need to do is come together as staff and as parish leadership. And we need to, each time we gather, go over each part of the seed and say, since the last time we met, how have we increased engagement? How have we done with evangelization? How would you say, our discipleship is here? Like, you could literally ask the question. I ask this question of communities all the time. Let's just have an exercise. What's the percentage of your community that you think are intentional disciples? Go ahead, ask the question. I mean, it's an opinion question. It's neither right nor wrong. But, the question then is, like, when you get together, did we increase that number? And then 4, how many people do we think are engaged in a real stewardship way of life? I think that would be key. Let's move on to the next one.
Okay. I think Jan and Judy have the same concern. They want you to put up the webinar address again. Jan says, it's a great presentation. Always love to hear your slant on
So
things.
it's right there on my picture.
Yeah, I can't see it, so I was.
You really can't see it, huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know someone just typed it. Someone typed it. Larry. Thank you, Larry. Larry's a great guy. Larry typed it in the chat, so you can find it there.
Okay, great. Judy also wants to know, what kind of questions do you ask to help figure out what stage they're in?
That's an excellent question. So I tend to ask very bold and pointed questions, and they're usually opinion questions. And so, like, one of those questions is, what do you what if you were to guess, what is the percentage of your parish community that are intentional disciples? I asked the question, what if you were to guess, what do you think is the percentage of people in your parish community that could explain clearly who Jesus is if you were to ask them? Not a textbook definition, but would be able to respond much like they know someone, right? ask questions like that become very kind of thought-provoking. And I was in one parish. I tell this story super quick because I know there may be a couple more questions coming in super quick because this is just so awesome. Narrow it down. So in one parish one time, and we were going through these questions. I was leading them through this process and asked a question about intentional disciples, and the parish chairperson just got so frustrated, and he's like, we've been talking about this, and the bar is so high that you're talking about, and I think the number is 0. I can't take it's just 0. Okay, so we just got to let him go. So then a couple weeks later, he comes to the director of stewardship in the parish, and he says, hey, you want to know what I just did this past Saturday? He says, I got up before sun rose, and I went and hung out with migrant workers, helping them fill out forms so they can get social services. Okay, and I stayed there till after sundown because I speak Spanish and I'm a lawyer. I know how to do this. He goes, do you know why I did that? And the stewardship director said, no, why? And he goes, because I don't want to be part of the 0% any longer. I mean, I cried. I mean, that was just like, oh, that's so awesome. So you ask bold questions, push people out of their comfort zones. Next.
Okay, Father James Aboy says, how do we move parishioners from customer service expectations to true engagement and having a sense of ownership of their church? For instance, most volunteers believe they are only helping the pastor to be successful. As such, they feel disengaged when the pastor does not constantly show them appreciation for what they do.
We have very short period of time here. So, I mean, and I don't want to be too simplistic about this, but the answer is love them. That's the answer. Love them at every turn. Show that you love them. Show that you care. Go out into the community. Meet them where they are. Show them that this is a family and that it isn't a business where you just stop by the parish office. Go out into the community. I mean, I almost think after working 22 years in a parish, one of the things that just kind of hampers us as a parish is the parish office, because we set up in our parish office castle, as it were. I mean, I had an awesome office, I had a nice desk, everything like that, and we hang out there. And the thing is, if we're about the good news, bringing the good news into every life situation for people, guess where those people aren't? Hanging out in my office with my nice desk. So we got to go, and we've got to love. We've got to just make it personal and just reach down deep. Do we have time for maybe one more?
You. No, actually, we've got about 3 minutes.
Okay,
I
good.
wanted to remind everyone that they can come to the LPI booth and meet with the Tracy several times throughout this. You can also get information from the LPI website. We want to thank Tracy Earl Welliver and all who attended today's session. Again, please come by the booth. We'll be able to share information and get you connected with Tracy. All questions you can turn around and answer there. Larry did put in the chat the panelists and attendees website so that you can go in there. And this session is being recorded. So thank you again, Tracy, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you. God bless.